Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about 7 must-draft breakout candidates as we approach our upcoming 2025 fantasy football drafts. Now, over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about players at a variety of different positions: quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, and running back. So why not go ahead and begin by talking about the thumbnail of today's episode, rookie running back RJ Harvey of the Denver Broncos. Now, a lot has been made of rookie running backs this offseason with talents such as Aston Genty, Omarion Hampton, and Travion Henderson, who have all moved up draft boards, yet it's been all quiet on the RJ Harvey front over the course of the last couple weeks, even though there's been a lot of momentum in his favor. Now, as of this current moment in time, depending on what platform you play on, RJ Harvey still has solid draft capital invested within him, as he's currently going as the RB 21 to 26, depending on where you play and whether it's a half or full PPR scoring format. But what does a true breakout season for RJ Harvey look like? In my opinion, it's top 15 potential for upside, which I truly do believe he's capable of, not only because of the situation that he's in, but also the talent and the history of success in regards to second round selected running backs within their NFL draft. Over the course of the last 5 seasons, we have seen 11 running backs selected within the second round of the NFL draft. Now, of those 11 running backs, 9 of them had healthy rookie seasons when we exclude Jonathan Brooks and Breece Hall, who both unfortunately had season-ending injuries within their rookie year. Now, of those 9 running backs, when we talk about running backs who didn't have immediate competition when they were drafted, so we're excluding guys like A.J. Dillon, who the year prior to him being drafted, Aaron Jones was RB2 overall. We're excluding Zach Charbonnet, who joined Kenneth Walker, who the year before was the number 16 running back, and James Cook, who joined Devin Singletary, who was the RB20. So again, all 3 of those running backs joining backfields with pre-established backs who were top 20 in terms of fantasy success. So of the remaining 6 running backs, 5 of those 6 were able to find immediate success. And of course, we're all top 24 ranked within their rookie season. We're talking about guys like Kenneth Walker, Jonathan Taylor, Javonte Williams, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins. So going into this upcoming season, there's a lot of potential for RJ Harvey to follow in their footsteps. And speaking of J.K. Dobbins, that is the primary kind of threat to RJ Harvey within this backfield. Is J.K. Dobbins this offseason, obviously with a successful year in 2024 with the Los Angeles Chargers, was signed by the Denver Broncos. And just a couple weeks ago, when I talked about my first running back rankings video of the season, I mentioned that J.K. Dobbins' potential and the reason why he was primarily signed was an indictment on Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin. And based on what we have seen thus far within the preseason, it really does speak towards that. Within the first preseason game, we're talking about RJ Harvey dominating in terms of overall offensive usage. He received all the rushing attempts and ran more routes than J.K. Dobbins. In fact, played majority of the offensive snaps on first and second downs, playing 12 of the 13 on first and second down, while J.K. Dobbins was primarily the third down back, of course, in there for pass blocking purposes. Now, as we continue into the second preseason game, we continue to witness great flashes from RJ Harvey. Of course, scored a touchdown and is continuing to get himself utilization within the starting lineup of this offense that, again, is going to be able to find themselves a lot of success in 2025. Now, the only thing we were wondering going into the 2025 season was, is RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins going to be a Mark Ingram / Alvin Kamara backfield? Because we know that Sean Payton, formerly head coach of the New Orleans Saints, of course, in those days in which Alvin Kamara certainly took over that backfield, we were wondering, is it going to be a clear approach where Harvey's the number 1, or are we going to see a split? And in my mind, it's going to be the clear approach in which Harvey, even if he is splitting early on in the season, is going to be able to take over. And with the volume of opportunity that is available to him within this upcoming season, based on the usage of running backs in 2024 by the Broncos, they give their running backs the 17th most opportunities, 450 total, with 343 attempts and 107 targets. Again, on a per game average, that's 26.47 opportunities per game to their running backs, which is an incredible number. And amongst all teams over the course of the last 2 seasons, the Denver Broncos ranked second in terms of running back targets, as they've targeted their running backs 257 times in the last 2 seasons. And considering we know that Sean Payton and his history with pass catching running backs such as Reggie Bush, Darren Sproles, Pierre Thomas, Alvin Kamara, even, Jaleel McLaughlin in the last couple seasons has functioned in that capacity. We have seen them all be fantasy relevant to an extent, obviously some more than others. And going into this upcoming season, we're anticipating that RJ Harvey can fit into that Alvin Kamara-esque role where he is utilized as a joker, not only as a rushing threat, but as a receiving threat on a down basis. So as he joins an offense that is going to provide him early down rushing opportunities on first and second down. Additionally, receiving upside. Additionally, he's joining a good football team that, again, should have a winning record. When we talk about the 2024 Denver Broncos from weeks 11 through 18, as a team, they were averaging 32.6 points per game. And their beginning of the 2025 schedule consists of 5 of their first 7 games against the Titans, Colts, Bengals, Jets, and Giants. I'm expecting immediate success from RJ Harvey, and where he's currently being selected, there's a lot of value to be had based on that current investment. Now, besides drafting RJ Harvey, another way to act upon his potential is to head on over to Betr and, of course, check out the NFL future plays. If we go ahead and look at players potentially at the running back position, go down and find RJ Harvey. He's currently sitting at a number of 699.5 rushing yards. I would take more on that going into this upcoming season, especially considering what we have seen from Denver Broncos running backs just this most recent year in 2024. Javonte Williams, 513 rushing yards on 139 attempts with a less than 4 yard per carry average. Julian McLaughlin had 496 rushing yards with 113 attempts. Harvey's expected to at least get 180 to 200 rushing attempts if he's able to average a base of 4 yards per carry. And again, that's a base. He's going to get himself somewhere close to 900 to 1,000 rushing yards. This number of 699.5, I don't think is going to cut it. We're taking more on that and adding that within a play as we'll continue on within today's episode, as we'll put together a couple in regards to this upcoming season. Now, speaking of plays, for those of you who want to go ahead and make some plays via Betr, travel on down to the description and check out the link. When you travel on over there, you can, of course, put together some plays yourself, put my predictions to the test, and, of course, get my draft rankings for the remainder of the season. All you have to do is sign up using code Andrew, make a first-time deposit minimum of $10, and make a $1 play minimum in regards to the Betr Picks section. So if you go ahead and put a play in which you have a guy like RJ Harvey and one of the following players that we're going to talk about in today's episode, you'll go ahead and be eligible, and I'll be sending my rankings from my email directly to yours for the remainder of the season. In regards to the month of August, these are draft rankings by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, and flex in a top 200 rate. And of course, these rankings continue every single Sunday morning for the remainder of the season. So for those of you who are wondering if you could take advantage of the opportunity, check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. And if you play up to $10 today, you'll get 30 instantly via Betr. So go ahead, take advantage of the opportunity and follow today's plays, of course, beginning with RJ Harvey. Now let's continue on with another breakout candidate going into 2025, who I believe to be George Pickens. Again, George Pickens is one of these players that, based on his potential ceiling, it looks like he has been a disappointment for his entire career. Yet he has still finished as wide receiver 42 last year, having missed 3 games with with an injury. The year prior finished as wide receiver 26, and in his rookie year finished as wide receiver 36. So again, he has been in that top 36 conversation on a consistent basis. So you may be wondering to yourself, what does a breakout season look like for George Pickens? Well, I think that's even beyond the top 24. I think top 24 would be at its potential base of production, considering what he's already been able to accomplish within his career, within the offenses that he's played within in Pittsburgh, being very much so run heavy. Additionally, having very little quarterback competency over the course of his entire career. We're talking about guys like Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, Justin Fields, and Russell Wilson. Now that you join Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott is going to be the best quarterback that he's ever played with in his entire career. And when we look at 2022 to 2024, over the course of Pickens' career, he's had 28.7% of the targets that have been sent in his direction deemed uncatchable. So with so many opportunities that were sent in his direction falling to the wayside because of the incompetency at the quarterback position for the Pittsburgh Steelers, now that you're joining Dak Prescott, that since 2022 has had the 5th best quarterback accuracy in terms of passes 10 or more yards down the field, the quality opportunities are going to be there, and it's going to make a difference in order to elevate George Pickens to that next level. Pickens, who over the course of his career thus far has averaged over 15 yards per reception every year and over a 13.0 ADOT every single season of his career. He is a deep ball receiving threat that in 2024, amongst all wide receivers, were number 4 in terms of targets, 20 or more yards down the field, and number 2 in terms of receptions, and number 2 in terms of receiving yards within that category. We look back at the 2023 Dak Prescott era, in which he was number 5 in terms of passing attempts, 20 or more yards down the field, number 1 in completions, number 5 in passing yards, and number 3 in passing touchdowns. So when you add the potential of Dak Prescott and the upside that he can provide to George Pickens going into the 2025 seasons, and when we take into account that the Dallas Cowboys, amongst all teams over the 2023 and 2024 seasons, have been number 3 and number 8 in terms of total passing attempts in each of those seasons. We're talking about 635 and 614 passing attempts. There's a lot of opportunity for success for George Pickens, who, yes, he's going to be competing with CeeDee Lamb, who clearing away is the number 1 of this offense. But even if he's able to sustain his 10 target per game on average, that's only 30% of the target share. That's 180 of the 600 potential targets going into this upcoming season, leaving upwards of 70% of the target share available for someone like George Pickens, who could definitely dominate a 25% share. And if our expectations come to reality and those targets go in his direction, we're talking about an offense that back in 2023, both CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson were both top 5 in terms of red zone targets amongst all receiving options in the NFL. Of course, CeeDee Lamb was number 1 amongst all receiving options in terms of red zone receiving touchdowns in 2023, and Jake Ferguson ranked 14th amongst all receiving options. So why not someone like George Pickens, who is a, catch in traffic, contested receiving option kind of receiver that down in the red zone finds his success? I think going into this upcoming season, considering this offense is going to probably be in a lot of negative game scripts, having to throw the ball for majority of second half of games, it is going to prompt George Pickens with a lot of opportunity. And without much of a rushing attack, considering we still don't know who the primary running back is, it's going to be Jaden Blue, going into this upcoming season, I would anticipate that George Pickens is going to see a lot easier opportunities to find success. Currently being drafted as the number 27 to 29 wide receiver on Sleeper, ESPN, and Yahoo, presents a lot of potential for upside in which he can find himself a statement season and truly break out prior to, of course, inking a contract in 2026. Now, if we head on over to Betr, as of right now, talking about the potential of George Pickens, he has 2 projections as it currently stands, more or less on 899 and a half receiving yards and 5.5 receiving touchdowns. I think he's very much so capable of accomplishing more on both of those numbers. Now, again, touchdowns are incredibly difficult to predict in fantasy and within an upcoming season. So I'm more inclined to lean in the direction of the 899 and a half receiving yards, because even this most recent season, with only 14 games played, George Pickens had an exact 900 receiving yards. So if he's able to stay healthy and he's able to have competent quarterback play in which 30% of the targets that he's getting in his direction aren't, deemed uncatchable, again, I'm expecting him to be able to surpass this number. I'm taking more on it. Again, remember last season, he had 900 yards on 59 receptions. All he needs in 17 games is 53 receiving yards per game, which I certainly believe he's going to be able to accomplish this upcoming season for, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, let's go ahead and let's move on to the next player I wanted to mention. It's second-year quarterback Caleb Williams. Now, this offseason, I've been relatively high on Caleb Williams in a lot of the Chicago Bear pieces because I truly do believe we are going to see upside from this offense. Now, as it currently stands, depending on what platform you play on, Caleb Williams is being drafted as QB 14 to 16. And even though the top left of the screen does say must draft, you're basically drafting him as your second quarterback, or even in the later rounds if you're just trying to punt at the quarterback position and maybe stack 2 quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams and play matchups over the course of this entire season. So you're not having to make a top tier investment, yet you're going to potentially get a quarterback that is going to present a breakout potential and can be a top 10 QB by the end of the 2025 season when it's all said and done. My latest rankings, which again, I'll go over tomorrow in regards to my top 32 quarterbacks, I have him ranked as my number 10 quarterback going into the year for fantasy purposes, and I'll tell you exactly why. Not only has he proven from his rookie season what he's capable of based on what he's accomplished, but he's going to improve greatly based on what this team has addressed this offseason. First and foremost, when we look back at 2024, in the post-Shane Waldron era, after the offensive coordinator was fired, from weeks 10 through 18, we're talking about him averaging 16.69 fantasy points per game in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. On a 17-game pace, that's 283 fantasy points, which would have ranked him as quarterback 12 overall in 2024. Now, that's with no offensive line, no Colston Loveland or, Luther Burden, and no coaching. Quite literally, you had an offensive coordinator that was fired midway through the season, and a head coach that was fired midway through the season. And now you go ahead and you address all 3 of those aspects in order to elevate Caleb Williams. So you improve the offensive line. As a quarterback who was sacked 68 times in 2024, most amongst all quarterbacks in the NFL, you bring in Joe Thuney, you bring in Drew Dahlman, you bring in Jonah Jackson. 3 interior offensive linemen that are going to solidify the interior so he can step up in the pocket while he still has functioning offensive tackle play, which again, some of those offensive tackles actually providing at a very high rate in 2024 and can continue that success this upcoming season. Not only that, You, of course, bring in new weapons like Colston Loveland with first-round draft capital, Luther Burden with second-round draft capital. So when you improve the offensive weapons that kind of surround him, and then additionally, you can utilize those weapons with primary play calling from Ben Johnson, who is now the new head coach, who is going to throw everything at Caleb Williams and give him all the weapons and, of course, all the tools that he needs to find success. We're talking about Ben Johnson, who elevated Jared Goff to being the number 6, 7, and 10 overall quarterback in the last 3 seasons of fantasy football, while averaging the number 7, 12, and 13th most fantasy points per game at the position within those 3 seasons. Not to mention, of course, Caleb Williams has rushing upside within himself, which is borderline elite. Last season, 489 rushing yards, 372 of which were from scramble plays, 48 total scrambles. And when Shane Waldron was, of course, fired, after that point, Caleb Williams was continuing to look to make plays, averaging 31 rushing yards per game. Now, I don't expect him to be able to kind of have that level of success every single outing, but when we're talking about the potential of what he found last season and what he could very easily find this season with 400 rushing yards, when we talk about the fact that he had 0 rushing touchdowns last year with 400 rushing yards, 489 to be exact, that's an anomaly. Over the course of the last decade, quarterbacks who have had 400 or more rushing yards typically average 5.9 rushing touchdowns in that given season. If we go even further and talk about quarterbacks who only ever had 400 to 499 rushing yards within a given season, those quarterbacks average 3.7 rushing touchdowns. So again, there's even more potential for upside within that category. Now, speaking of potential for upside, when we go ahead and travel on over to Betr and look at his projections going into this upcoming season, 3,549.5 passing yards. Last season, Caleb Williams, with no offensive line, less weapons, and no Ben Johnson, and no coaching staff, he was able to throw for 3,541 passing yards. So he quite literally only needs to improve by throwing 10 yards more in this upcoming season, and he's able to crush that number. I think this is absolutely free in my mind. I am adding this to the list of entry as we continue on in regards to our better play going into this week. Now, before we continue, again, for those of you who like the information that I just provided in regards to averages of rushing yards from quarterbacks and the touchdowns they're able to score, a lot of that information is included within my 2025 fantasy football draft guide. So for those of you who are trying to get your hands on that, be sure to go ahead and check out Patreon. Again, it is exclusively available there along with rankings. Additionally, besides that, you can ask me individual questions and you can go ahead and join the private Discord community server available there. Again, for those of you who are interested, links down in the description. Thank you very much for all the support. Now, as you can see on screen, we have tight ends such as, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, David Njoku within the draft guide. Speaking of the tight end position, let's talk about Dalton Kincaid, a tight end that as of right now is being drafted as tight end 11 through 14, depending on what platform you're playing on. I'm seeing more of like 13 or 14, but again, you would only draft him as potentially your number 2 tight end. And if you're going to punt down the position and bring him as your tight end number 1 on roster, I still don't see that as a problem because he is finished as the tight end number 11 overall back in 2023, his rookie campaign. And even though we all anticipated him to improve upon that, in 2024 didn't find much success. We're talking about his 2023 campaign averaging 5.69 targets per game. Then his 2024 campaign, only 5.83 targets per game. Not as much of a jump as we anticipated, but yet had himself a good 17-game pace that if he had stayed healthy, we're talking about 99 targets within the 2024 year. Going into 2025, with the potential of not as many weapons being added to this offense, you're only bringing in Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer, and we're going to potentially see Dalton Kincaid take steps forward as a receiving threat within this offense because the efficiency from not only himself, but Josh Allen is going to increase. So let me tell you exactly what I mean by that. Last season, Dalton Kincaid had 75 targets and only 44 receptions. That's a 58.7% catch rate. Amongst all tight ends in 2024 with a minimum of 10 targets, that was the 7th worst catch rate amongst all. It was so historically bad that when we look at even the top 10 tight ends of last season, not a single one of them had less than 70% catch rate. So again, if we're trying to get back into the conversation of being a top 10 tight end, which I believe the breakout season of Dalton Kincaid entails him being a top 10 tight end by the end of this season, if he's able to get back into that conversation, it is going to require him to make a lot more receptions. And when we look at his passing opportunities that were deemed catchable in 2024, of these 75 targets, only 49 of them were deemed catchable, meaning he caught 44 of those 49 targets which is a 90% catch rate. If Josh Allen improves, he is going to elevate Dalton Kincaid. I saw an interview the other day in which Josh Allen specifically said there were 4 times last season in which I blatantly missed Dalton Kincaid for wide open touchdowns in which he would have walked in. I got to be better at that. I got to find Dalton Kincaid on a consistent basis. And with another offseason, of course, building a rapport with one another and hopefully, presenting the potential of Kincaid being the #1 receiving option of this offense. Again, he's only competing with Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir within those, opportunities as primary threats. I think Dalton Kincaid, who again last season was on pace for 99 targets, when we look at the last 5 seasons of the NFL and fantasy football, there have been a total of 26 tight ends that have gotten 100 or more targets within their given season. 25 of those 26 tight ends ranked within the top 12 of that position. If we're able to get 100 plus targets for Dalton Kincaid, expect top 12 minimum. If not, being able to potentially get those touchdowns and get into that top 8 conversation, which I believe he is certainly capable of accomplishing. Now, when we go ahead and head on over to Betr and we leave the Caleb Williams conversation, head on over to the tight end position. Let's go ahead and let's talk about Dalton Kincaid's 599.5 receiving yards. In his rookie season, he put up 673 receiving yards. With an improved catch rate this upcoming year, with an improved Josh Allen, with 100 plus potential targets, I think the number of 599.5 is going more. I think he's certainly going to be able to crush that number within an offense that, again, is at the top of the conversation on a yearly basis as they continue to light up opposing defenses. I think, again, Dalton Kincaid has a lot of untapped potential that he's going to find and break out with this season. Let's move on to the next player I wanted to mention is ISIAH Pacheco. I've talked about him a couple times this offseason, and I really do love the potential of ISIAH Pacheco, who is currently being drafted as RB 23 to 25. He's recently finished as RB 35, 16, and of course his most recent season, RB 63, which again is primarily scaring many of you off of ISIAH Pacheco. Andrew, why do you have him as a must-draft breakout? Because I truly do believe that the breakout potential of ISIAH Pacheco is what he found in terms of the success that he was eligible of earning in 2023 and even beyond that. This time last year, we talked about ISIAH Pacheco being an RB1 by the end of the 2024 season. And unfortunately, with the injury, he wasn't able to meet that potential. But when we look at his 2023 stats, 19 touches per game, 14 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. And looked at his early 2024 season prior to his injury, 20.5 touches per game, 14.2 half PPR fantasy points per game, on pace for that RB1 season. Then, of course, has the unfortunate reality of fracturing his fibula and never being the same since returning. But even in his absence, Kareem Hunt off the couch comes in 8 games and averages 21.5 touches per game and 13.71 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. And why that's so incredibly important to take into account is because it already proves that regardless of who's playing running back in this backfield, they're going to find success, but additionally proves the fact that Andy Reid wants one singular RB to give the ball to. He doesn't want a committee, and he's not going to find one in 2025 as ISIAH Pacheco is going to run away with this job behind a upper tier offensive line that has made improvements. And of course, within an offense that has so many receiving threats with Rice, Worthy, Kelsey, etc., you're not going to see very many 8+ defenders in the box. In fact, back in 2023, Pacheco only saw 12.2% of 8+ defenders in the box when he was in the backfield. That's the 9th lowest amongst all running backs. Even Kareem Hunt this most recent season, 17.5%, which was the 13th lowest amongst all running backs. I do truly believe that when you're talking about the potential of ISIAH Pacheco in regards to one of the best offenses in the National Football League, getting back to what he, has been able to perform on the ground through the air, I think, specifically on the ground this upcoming season, when we look at his numbers and the potential projections via Betr, it's sitting at a sheer, unbelievably low 720.5 rushing yards. We're taking more on that. Again, continuing to add up the potential. And if we're going to add this, look at the entire entry as a whole. We have 5 players who I truly believe are going to be able to produce. And as it currently stands, if we go ahead and put together the perfect play in which you have the potential of winning 200. And again, if you play up to $10 today on Betr, like I've said before, you get $30 instantly back. So you can go ahead, place an entry like such as I'm doing and follow within these predictions. Good to go. We'll view the entry and it's there. Permanent, ready to go. And again, even if you guys make a mistake in terms of putting in an entry, you can cancel it within 3 minutes and you're good to go. But there's no need to cancel this one as we are continuing on by talking about the next players I wanted to mention, which again, close out today's video in regards to wide receivers of the New Orleans Saints, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. Now, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, their values, considering they're the number 1 and number 2 receiving options of the Saints offense, you know, Olave's going off the board as wide receiver 33 to 40. Rashid's going off the board anywhere between wide receiver 53 to 60. Again, regardless of platform, they are being undervalued based on what they were able to contribute early last season. I'm talking about Chris Olave early last season. In the 6 healthy games he played, was averaging 9.98 fantasy points per game and a half PPR. Over a 17-game pace, that's 170 fantasy points, and finishing as wide receiver 26 overall. And that's considering 2 of his 6 healthy games consisted of 2.1 and 2.0 fantasy points. So the other 4 games truly did carry his fantasy point workload within that conversation. And this is a wide receiver that in his past has finished as wide receiver 19 and 25. So 26 wasn't out of the realm of possibility, if not better, in 2024. And unfortunately, of course, sustained 2 concussions over the course of a 1 single month period, which knocked him out for the remainder of the season. And I'm glad they held him out. But now that you go into this upcoming season, sure, he does have the risk of concussions, but that risk is baked into his current value ADP point of being the wide receiver 30 to 40. So if we're going to be in a situation in which we can invest in him and this Kellen Moore offense, that of course is going to see negative game scripts and throwing the ball for majority of the second half, and with Spencer Rattler being most likely the starting quarterback, it does provide a little bit more experience and hopefully more opportunities for someone like Chris Olave to find immediate success. Again, he is the clear number 1 receiving option in this offense. We have seen him find success in his NFL career. All he truly has to do is get lucky and stay healthy, avoid any concussion, potential symptoms, any situation of that sort, and he's going to easily be able to outproduce his current ADP. Now, for those of you who potentially want to avoid injury potential, go ahead and draft Rashid Shaheed, because last season, he actually was better than Chris Olave. Prior to his injury from weeks 1 through 6, he was the number 17 overall wide receiver, number 27 in terms of fantasy points per game on average, which includes one singular game between weeks 1 through 6, in which he put up 0.0 fantasy points, where he dropped a touchdown and 2 other additional passes within that game. Otherwise, his other performances consisted of 16.6, 13.7, 18.9, 14.8 fantasy points and a half PPR as a monster deep receiving threat who is now getting himself opportunity share within the slot receiving role this season, within the preseason role that he's already been exposed within. I truly do believe that Rashid Shaheed should be looked at as a wide receiver that can, in the event in which Chris Olave goes down with an injury or misses time, can very easily be top 36 on a weekly basis, because he is the primary receiving threat on this offense that has to throw the ball for majority of games in order to find themselves even competing, much less winning. I anticipate both these wide receivers to be able to crush their ADPs going into this upcoming season. I understand the quarterback play is not pretty within the Saints organization, yet it doesn't matter. We have seen other wide receivers, most recently, for example, Calvin Ridley finish as a top 30 wide receiver in 2024 with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph as his quarterback. So even with subpar quarterback play, we have found fantasy success. Even guys like George Pickens, who has throughout his career played with Pickett, Trubisky, Rudolph, been top 26 within his 2023 campaign. We've seen it done before, and these wide receivers will be able to deliver for us in 2025. But that's going to cover it for me today in regards to must draft the breakout candidates going into the 2025 season. If you enjoyed today's content, of course, be sure to subscribe, click the like button down below. I'll be back tomorrow talking about my top 32 quarterback rankings and tiers for the 2025 season for our upcoming drafts. I do appreciate the continued support. Again, check out Betr, use code Andrew today, and of course, check out the Patreon for those of you who want additional content besides the channel. But outside of that, thank you everybody for watching, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.